Well, welcome tonight to Wednesday Night Live. It's so great to have you with us as Calvary Kids presents another one of our parenting nights. We had such a great time a couple of months ago with Dr. Robbie Sundarega. If you haven't seen that one about faith formation and how habits are formed in children, you can go back on our YouTube channel and check that one out. But tonight, it's a great privilege to introduce two of my great friends, Pastor Joel and Pastor Sharon Chelliah from Western Australia. It's great to have you with us.
Hey guys, hello, how you doing?
Joel and Sharon are pastor Centrepoint Church in Western Australia. They have three incredible boys. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about you? You've also authored a book. We're going to talk a little bit about that tonight. So let's hear about your family, what you do.
Okay, hi guys. Look, we are greatly honoured to be here tonight, to be able to share. And we've been married for 20 years, September 22nd this year. And we've got three boys, Levi, Noah and Micah.
Yeah. Don't ask me the ages, my brain's not working right now.
17, 15 and 13. So newly teenage and about to enter into year 12, about to finish school. So that's the youngest is 13 years
Is that driving, like driving age? Driving.
Yeah, we're doing the L plate thing at the moment, to and from school. Yeah.
Wow.
Pray for us. Pray for us.
Joel and Sharon, you over in Western Australia in your church there, you've been running a marriage conference or retreat for a number of years. It's a huge passion of you, as well as passion as former kids pastors to really invest into families. Can you just tell us a little bit around that, like your passion as senior pastors around both never really leaving the children's ministry space, but really loving both marriages and also into the kids ministry?
Yeah, look, we found that, we were getting a whole spate of marriage counselling taking place in the church. A lot of people going through difficult issues, and we thought, what can we do for everybody? How can we lift the standard of marriages in our church right across from the newlyweds right to the elderlies? And so we thought we'd put together a marriage summit, which is an overnighter. We hire out a whole hotel. Wow. We have speakers, and basically we have a whole heap of fun and allow our couples to rediscover each other, to fall in love with their partner again.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
And that really came out of a space, I think, having grown up in church, where you hear a lot of the biblical perspective, but not fleshed out. Like, not people sharing their journey and how the word becomes alive in a marriage. What is the context? How does it relate when you're arguing or when you're struggling in a certain area? And so we thought that that's a space that it needs to be heard. People need to be able to hear real life. How do you do marriage before God? How do you do it well? And the only space for that really comes from sharing your journey and walking with people through the challenges.
Well,
and I guess we're just prepared to share.
Yeah, that's
that's
amazing.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Brilliant. I love that, and it will lead into the first question I have, because obviously that safe family, that safe atmosphere of parents is really helpful in setting up the atmospheres and the space. Before we dive into that first conversation around that, if you've got any questions and you're watching, whether you're on our Facebook platform or you might be at our online platform, please put the comments through in the chat field. You can go onto the chat, start asking questions. We're going to explore things around marriage, around creating safe spaces, sexuality, how to have the chat with your children, all of these areas we're going to have a look at tonight. So any questions you've got, start putting them into the chat field, and we're going to get to them. But for me, I guess I want to lean into that space off the back of your real passion with marriage. But what would you say is the number one thing that really sets that atmosphere in the home to create that safe space, so as the children are getting older, you can, like you're saying, modeling it, but you can start to have some more interesting conversations?
Yeah, look, I think that the foundation of family is the marital relationship. I think the relationship between mum and dad, husband and wife, needs to be strong. Otherwise, that fracture will actually go through every member of that household. And so making sure that our relationship is really strong, that we are one and united. I come from a Malaysian Indian background. Sharon is a part Maori New Zealander, and we both found each other in Australia. Our parenting styles are shaped by our parents, and our parents are hugely different. I mean, completely like opposite ends of the spectrum. And so when we started parenting our kids, I would parent like my parents parented, and Sharon would parent like her parents parented, and that led to a whole heap of trouble. That actually ended up causing so much fights between us and disagreements in how to discipline, how to set goals, and so we've had to work on our relationship in order to actually help our kids become the men that God has planned for them to be.
I think as well, just being really intentional about the space that we get to create the culture in this home, and recognizing and being really intentional about that it's our decision. We don't actually have to reproduce what we have come from, but actually choosing to create a kingdom culture and being really intentional about working hard to see that come through, because it's really hard to break those old habits of reproducing what you've come from. But actually I think we came to a point going, no, actually, we have the power here to set a brand new culture for this family, and what do we want that culture to be? And being really intentional around that space. Yeah,
that's a big part of that process for us was actually traditions as well, Andy. Just what sort of traditions did we want to bring into our family? Because traditions establish a culture. Yes. And so if we don't have healthy traditions, we won't have a healthy culture. So we looked at the areas that we wanted to change from the way we were brought up, and we brought in some traditions to actually build a healthier culture in our household.
This week, actually, my eldest son turns 13. And so we're about to have a teenager in the home. So it's going to be new for us. And just on those traditions, what you're talking about, we're actually going to Sydney and we're going to walk over the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It's something we've spoken about since he was little, that it's that moment of, okay, we want it to remember to go into adulthood. And there's those little moments of creating those spaces of memory and traditions along the way. That's obviously one of those big monumental ones, but it's those little traditions also. Whereas if you ask my boys, it's that moment of going down to McDonald's to have the ice cream, just to talk about anything. And those conversations started with, have you heard any bad words? And at school. And those ice cream trips eventuated into, and we'll talk about it in a moment, but the book that, likewise, we've got 3 boys, the chat book that you've written has been a huge resource for us in our home, but it eventually gets to there. How have you shaped some of those smaller steps and those smaller traditions right back here in order to get to that place of, okay, you can actually have some pretty open conversations with your kids?
Yeah. So some of the traditions that we would encourage people to do is to build relationship with their kids through things like having a family dinner. We talked about that. Growing up, we never ended up in our own households having dinner together as a family. It's one of those traditions that we put in place so that we could actually discuss the day every single day together. It's something we've had to fight for. It's something that we've had to plan around, especially now that they're getting older. One wants to go and work out, the other one wants to have a shower. And we'd have to drag the whole family together. I've got homework, I've got to go out. And we've had to say that this is a tradition in our household. We eat together every night together. Right. In that time, there is no mobile phones. There is no answering the phone. There is communication. And sometimes, I've had to force that, and it's never fun around the table when you've had to force and tell somebody off. But we fought for those traditions, and I think it's those sort of traditions that build that culture of friendship and communication that then help us to have those deeper discussions.
And do some other ones, obviously bedtime is a big thing, that we always take that time together before bed. We started that early on, that it will be our time to pray, it will be our time to look over the day, raise concerns. We built that in early on, and I think that's very powerful and very important to have that rapport with your children around those spaces. What else have we done?
The other tradition is never going to bed angry. So sometimes I've lost my temper temper, not sometimes, quite a few times. And, that means I have to go back and make it right before they go to bed, because I don't want them to have a bad night's sleep. And there's nothing like a grudge or an offense to keep a little mind up all night.
Yes.
And so just, things like that, we just have been really particular about building traditions. Our prayer time for me with the boys is in the car on the way to school. Every time at a set traffic light, we turn off the music, we all pray. We go through the car. Every single time I drop them off, that's my prayer time with the boys on the way to school. So it's these little traditions of goodness, little investments in faith and relationship throughout the day that actually help build a culture overall.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. For the families within Calvary context here that are watching, you'll be familiar with our Calvary faith pathways, our family faith pathways. If you're not, you can go onto our website and it's a guide or a stage by stage help to you that does suggest and help you just in each stage of the child's life how to put in some of these habits, how we do these behaviours, and I know that Christy and I do the same thing. It's driving to school, bedtime, all of those little things are so important, and in the context of where the discussion's going now around sexuality and having some of these chats, sometimes we think these tasks are so spiritual, which they are, but they're actually quite practical in building that safe atmosphere in the home to have the conversation. Yeah. When you look back now, so here you are with teenagers out the other end, would you attribute all of those little habits and those areas as to why you have such a good open relationship and conversation with your boys now? Is that really the key, you see?
Look, we are far from perfect, and I would hate to paint this picture that we've put it together. We still have our meltdowns, we still have our disagreements, but my eldest is now becoming an adult. He's just turned 17 on Sunday, and but the relationship we have has been built on through little investments. So I feel for anybody who feels maybe that their relationships in their family are so broken that it's too far gone, you don't need to do massive changes. You just need to start with one change, just one little investment today. Start with one change today, and then over a couple of weeks add another one. And it's just these small little increments and investments into relationship, into their faith, that actually turns the whole ship around.
Yeah, so they know that they can come to you. They know that they can talk to you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of our craziest sex talks actually happened on the way back from school.
Right.
I nearly drove off the road. But it just comes because we've cultivated that. That you come to us, we will talk about it. There's that we're a safe place, and if there's something on your mind, if there's something concerning you, it's through those, like you said, those small things. We've developed that culture of conversations in the car, before bed, dinner time. We're always here.
Okay, so three boys like us, three radically different personalities. Having the discussion, and I know for me, and to give context, the book you've written, the chat, it's for dads to have the conversation with boys. At the end of it, I've also got a great resource for girls that we'll put up there as well. So a resource that we've recommended to girls, which is fantastic. But in the context of the book you wrote, Joel, can you just tell us a little bit about that book and how that came about?
Yeah, look, my boys were asking questions. Well, my eldest actually started asking questions around 7 years old. And so I thought I better go and prepare myself for this, and I will, go to Coorong, get whatever I could get. And there's some of the books that I saw there, they were brilliant resources, lots of brilliant resources, but there was nothing that I particularly thought would suit my boy at 7 years old that didn't go into so much stuff. And also there was so many boy things that were particularly for boys only, that questions that he was asking me that I needed answered. So we basically wrote the book from the many questions and conversations that boys would have about their bodies, about their willies, about sex, and so basically from there, the book was published, and it's really helping, it's in its second print now. It's really helping hundreds and hundreds of families, which we're just thrilled about.
It is brilliant. So I remember the first time I used the book, and so here I am. I often hear the phrase, if they're the age 8, it's too late. Like, you need to be not in depth having conversations, but starting to lead into it. So creating safe spaces. Christy and I we didn't want our boys to be finding out information from the schoolyard kid who's misinformed. We wanted them to be armed with the right information. So I remember my eldest, smart, scientific, they're talking about embryos. And so we're driving home, something to do with science, embryos, and that's how the conversation started. And it's funny, like you said, Sharon, that conversation in the car, it's wild. It starts, as I said, the little conversations. What are some words you're hearing at school? Do you know what those words mean? So for parents who are watching, I know that that's where it started. Always clarify what word. And so they go, if it's the S word or the F word or the C word, always clarify, because it's not always the one that you immediately go to, and you could be going right down the end to describe something, and they're like, I had no idea what you're talking about, Dad. So tell us some of these conversations. What are some real tips that you would have as you lean into these conversations, like different personalities? How have you found unpacking those conversations?
Yeah, look, my eldest is when he was 7, because he was so curious. My youngest, we only did it when he was 8.5, because he was just oblivious.
Right.
And
yeah.
So you really need to go, look at each child individually and try to answer where they're at, and don't go beyond what, as you said, what they need to know. But
Yes.
I just think creating a safe place to talk about it is so important, and taking all the shame off.
Yeah, that's so good.
The start of the book is about talking to the fathers before you talk
Right.
to your children about sex.
Yeah.
Make sure you've dealt with your shame, because really sex is created by God. It's a gift. It's a miracle. It's meant to be enjoyed with no shame. And so if you don't deal with your shame, when you're talking about it, you put shame on it as something bad. And that's not how God wanted it to be. So when you deal with your shame, coming to God, deal with your brokenness first, then you can actually have that conversation and actually talk about the beauty of sex and what God has planned for it.
Yeah, so just a continuation on from that is we tried to be really intentional about not having an emotive response to some of these things that can be shocking, right? When they're talking about different sexual acts and you're like, what? You know what that, so we were trying to be even teach ourselves, like, nothing is out of bounds. We don't want to bring that shame in our response, in the way that we respond to some of the stuff that we're raising. We were really intentional about that, so that our boys could come to us with all of this crazy stuff and just feel safe, just feel like this is the right thing to do, this is normal, that we should talk and we should question and we should understand. So a big part of it was actually educating ourselves to kind of go, this is okay, Sharon, don't drive off the road, it's all right, stay on. We're going to talk about this, manage your response. And I think that has been really helpful.
Yeah, one of my children, we had that conversation when I said around 7, 8, but when they were 11 and a half, they were offered something in their local high school.
Right.
Offered a sexual act on the second week. And I was having a chat with him after, and he came and said, can I talk to you, Dad? Can we go for a walk? So I went for a walk, and he said, I was offered, blah, blah. And I was like, you're not even 12. And our girl said she would do that to me. And I was like, do you know what that means? Yes. And I'm like, what did you say? No. And then from there, we were able to have this conversation, right? It's because the door was opened when he was 7 that he could come to when he was 12.
Yes.
And we could actually put together a path to say, hey, listen, if you are ever tempted, you can always come to me. Yes. I will always be here. I will always pray for you. I will always stand by you. And we can have these discussions, And so now, as they're so much older, it's those beginning foundations, that safe place that has actually created a brilliant relationship for future challenges
Yeah.
in that area.
We've got a question here, and there's a couple coming through, and we'll just address a couple of them. Just keeping in that line, so we don't jump ship completely. What are some good questions to start the conversation? So, like I said, a good conversation may well be, what words are you hearing? That's back when you're 6, 7, 8 at school. But then as you're going a little bit further, what are some good conversations that if the kids aren't quite coming to you now, how can we go, all right, we've got parents and there's other questions there that are like, listen, what do you do if you're already down the track and the culture's sort of set? How do you go back? So the kids maybe, I'm assuming 9, 10, 11 already, but they're wanting to come back and start those conversations. How would you encourage parents to really initiate some of those questions or conversations?
That's a brilliant question. Look, I think you have to be proactive. So therefore, you don't have to wait sometimes for them to come and ask you. By the time a child is 8 and 8.5, you can have that conversation with them. So the way I would do it in the book, we encourage you to make it a special moment. So, I took my kids out to a place that they love. Back then, it was McDonald's. It wasn't hard to satisfy them. $5, and I've got a perfect, awesome event organized. And we went to McDonald's, and I took the book with them and said, listen, we're going to have a really important chat, but we're going to go to McDonald's. You can order whatever you want, and we're going to read this book together. And the best thing about the book is that it's a step-by-step tool.
Yeah.
It's a conversational starter. So I think that's the best part. When you don't know what to say, you just need somebody to read a book with you. And the book is the start. Yes. Right? Let's read a book together. And the book then asks questions that you answer together. Yep. And so I think that's probably the best way to go. But I think by the time a child is 8 or 9, if you haven't started the conversation, I believe you are running behind.
Yeah.
Because the gap that we make in these conversations are often filled by teachers, school students, internet, friends, and we want to be the first voice whenever it comes to this sort of life-shaping teaching. We want to be the first voice. We want to be the biblical voice. And so I've had my boys go and tell their school friends, no, that's not true. My dad told me. My dad told me that sex is actually between a man and a woman. It should be between a man and a woman, and it's only when they are married. That sort of stuff is the foundation that I want built in my children, and the world's not going to teach that to them. That's my job.
If I could add another thing to that, just about if you're looking for a conversation starter, I think I would be really prayerful around being observant about the situations and circumstances that your child is going through, because those are often window moments when you say you're at school and you can observe maybe a girl is liking your son, and then that's a great opportunity to go, so hey, is this the case, and how do you feel about that, and what do you think, and find ways. And I think the Holy Spirit is a great helper in that regard to help us watch over our children. Just little things like just those little prompter openers that are relevant to their everyday situation and circumstance, to kind of be that gateway to unpacking things or those kind of conversation starters. I think tend to be something that I use quite a lot.
I'm going to just, if I can, and I'm going to throw maybe our production team who are helping me out to this, I want to throw to something, just to pull it up on the screen to help, and we'll refer to it again later. But I want to show the resource that we do have, which is our the chat book that you have available. We've got the website there, so if people are wondering, like you said, this book will just help to start to walk through the discussions. And the other resource is called Pippin Girl. That's Pippin, Pippin Girl. And it's a great resource that's there. So on the screen there, you'll see the chat. And so that's there, the cover of the book, Understanding Puberty, Pornography, Sex and Marriage. And I have to say, to loop back around to what you were saying before, that first 2 pages that are dealing with the dad in understanding shame and coming at it from a biblical perspective, is like I haven't seen in any other book and resource in this space, and it's brilliant. So for families, then up on the screen you'll see Pip and Girl. You can go to the website there and you can get the resource that's helping to really shape those conversation for young girls. We'll come back to them again at the end, but I wanted to show everyone at home, and you can start to have a bit of a look at those. A question, and this is maybe a question to you as pastors, as also I can help answer that in the context of Calvary, but what do you do when there's single parents? So there's been a couple of comments that have come through on different streams of saying, hey, I'm a single parent, I'm doing this alone, I'm trying to have this conversation, I'm trying to shape culture alone, I'm trying to do this. I know from our perspective at Calvary, if they're teenagers, then we have vibrant youth ministries and youth leaders that can come alongside in the kids ministry, but looking for a guy or a girl, gender specific to what helps you, to come alongside and help you in the other side that is not there, someone that trusts you. But again, as pastors, what would you recommend in that space and you've found to really help single parents?
Look, I have to take my hat off to every single parent because we struggle with two of us, and
Absolutely.
and there's times where we're just like so exhausted, we just tag team and go, I'm done, you go and sort out your kid,
your kid.
You did this, and so to not be able to tag to somebody else and to be there through every situation, I think they need to be honored. Our single parents need to be honored and respected, and you need to know you're probably doing better than you think, because there is no perfect parent. I think that the whole thing of being in a church family, planted in a church family, is really gold. When you don't have that family member, when you don't have a father in the house, there are spiritual fathers in the house, as in the church house, that might be able to help in some way, form, either through youth ministry, children's ministry, be a part of a connect group where there are fathers in the, do you have small groups? Oh, I'm sure you do, small groups and connect groups at Calvary. These are the things. You've got to place yourself in places where your children can have a community, can have a tribe around them to help when they don't have that person in their life.
Yeah, and be really prayerful, I think, around that space, because, Father God has the greatest plans and the greatest desires for your children and for you as a parent. And so the right people that will bring exactly what is needed. He says that he puts the orphan in families, and I've often asked him, well, what does that look like? He puts the orphan in family, and this church community, that means that there are the right people for that child to connect in their relationship with God, to grow. And so just be prayerful over that space. Be looking for those people, be looking for those connections. And I just encourage you. I really believe in that, and be someone as well that is engaged in the community. That the right fathers and the right people can actually come to and be welcomed into your family unit. You be the person that invites that is easy to work with, so definitely believe God has good plans.
One thing we did when our boys were getting to the 13 teenage years is we started picking their friends for them without them knowing. So we basically started inviting different youth leaders to our house for dinner, where I'd cook a big curry and just invite all these people that I thought had godly character, that had good work ethic, that were friendly, were kind. In the youth ministry, I'd bring them to my house and we would have food and they would eat. And then my boys started forming relationships with good mentors and teenagers, because we realized that there comes a time where the teenagers don't want to listen to their parents. They're looking for their peers and their young adult counterparts to speak into their life. And I wasn't going to let them pick their own. I was going to pick the right ones for them without them knowing, and then orchestrate these gatherings, open your house up, so that good mentors can find relationship with your kids, and so that they can help speak into areas when your kids are not listening to you.
That's brilliant. I love that. cook a good curry and invite hungry older teenagers. Like, which 17, 18, 19-year-old's not going to turn up for free food? It's brilliant. But I love that you're still intentional at that point. It's okay.
Yeah.
Everything you're saying has intentionality around it to help shape. We really are. We are parenting. We're entrusted by God, our children, to be intentional to set them up for those wins. I love that. There's a couple more questions, and we may just bounce around for a little bit. But someone has mentioned or commented on age appropriateness, and I'll link that in with another question talking about correct language for terms. And so that's an interesting one, right? Because you don't want the child sitting at 14 at sex ed at school, and then they put their hand up and they answer to a name, and then that becomes their nickname for the next, 4 years. You know what I'm saying? So could you speak into that?
Sounds like a personal story there, Andy.
No, it's not. It happened to a friend.
Okay.
What would you say really around using correct terms and age appropriateness and all of that?
We don't use. I mean, look. Yes, I haven't had too many stories where a child has said, "Hey, it's a willy." No, it's a penis. Willy boy. I've never heard anything like that, to be honest. I think our boys do know the official terms, but I want to speak in a language that they are speaking, and so it's for me, it's the language. Now, not to be crass or rude. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about if there's a lingo that they're using to describe themselves, I'm not going to correct them. Right. No, I'm sorry, it's a penis.
Yes.
That's almost stealing from the conversation. If they're trying to converse with you, they don't want to be corrected, they want to be heard. Right? And this is not one of those moments where you're teaching on grammar, you're teaching on principles and faith, and you're trying to instill some of these godly characteristics in them, and they need to be heard. And so let them speak the way they're speaking, or they feel comfortable to speak. But I don't know how psychologically, I haven't done any study in the psychology of all that and whether that's wrong, but I found that with my kids, they don't want me to correct them on a terminology, they want me to hear their heart.
Yes, right. And within the book and the resources, really, it's just opening that heart and that conversation, and that, hey, here we go, we're safe, you can come here. I know you touched on the book, and questions come in, and at the beginning of your book, as I keep alluding to, was really dealing with that shame. But often that's probably, and in my experience dealing with children or teenagers or young adults, retrospectively, they're coming back to, they felt shamed in the way it was presented. So we've touched on that a little bit, but really, how can we encourage, or how do we help parents that are watching and listening to this? Yes, they can deal with their own shame, but not causing shame if children are messing up, or they have seen pornography, or they start going into that space, not bringing shame as the first response.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think. Do you want to speak into that, Annie?
Oh, you can, and then I will add.
Yeah, I feel like when somebody does something wrong sexually, they already feel shame. In most cases, people already feel shame when they've seen something. There is that conscience within them, especially children. They already feel shame. So when they're coming to you, it takes a lot of courage to confess and to bring forward. And when we go to Christ and we confess our sin, there is no heaping of shame. There is, whenever there's repentance, there is forgiveness. Mm-hmm. And then there is grace to help us close that door and to walk forward. That's what it is when we come to the Lord with repentance. And so in the same way, when a child comes to a parent repenting, then Dad and Mum must forgive. Dad and Mum must pray for that child and help break off whatever they've opened up, and also give them some practicals. Hey, can I help you practically walk into purity? Maybe I can take your phone off you at this time of night and give it back to you at this time of day. Maybe we don't go on the laptop in the bedroom, but we actually keep the laptop in the dining room. Because when someone is truly repentant, that's a great opportunity to bring in a healthy culture, a healthy traditions that will save them from future mess ups.
Yes.
You know, and so when someone's repenting, this is a great opportunity to help them bring practical change.
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
And I think one of the things that I found has been really helpful is, like, if they're struggling in a particular area, is acknowledging the struggle, that they're not the only person, that actually that there's that rapport of, hey, this is common to all of us. It's not just you, it's actually, and then that, again, this is why it's so important that we deal with our shame, because you can't approach that then, because it's like, no, we hide all of this, but actually, no, do you know what? I struggle with that too. I know what it's like to go through that. This is, you know, this is what I've learned. This is what God's taught me. This is how you meet that challenge, or this is how you meet that spot. And again, I think particularly in that area, you know, bringing those walls down, being honest, being vulnerable, being real, acknowledging the challenge, acknowledging the difficulty, acknowledging the pain, and then just using that as an avenue to walk with your child through whatever they're wrestling with.
Yeah, that's great. You've touched on some of the some things that lead into the next one, just around internet use and boundaries around devices. And I know that's going to be very different to some families, where in our home, you touched on it, we just don't have any devices in bedrooms. So they're just some practical boundaries that we put in place, certain times. I know that, you know, my 10-year-old, if he's watching something on YouTube, it's going to be his 10,000th rugby video for the day. But I also know that there's predators out there, and there's people out there who are going to embed horrible things in the midst of rugby videos, or horrible things in the midst of cartoons, you know. How have you approached, you know, some of this protection or safety? In fact, we are going to do a whole Wednesday night live later in the year with an expert in the field of this. But just touching on it now, how have you approached some of that?
I think some rules must be established from the very start. The earlier you establish the rules, the easier it is, because it becomes culture in the household, right? If you haven't done it and the kids are now teenagers, you're going to have to rebuild. That takes a lot more work, but can I encourage you to persist and keep going, because it's worth it, because you're not just fighting for your family, you're fighting for their future and their future family. So the rules for us would be no laptops in the room, no TVs in the room. Phones get switched off at 9 o'clock. They have to be put on the kitchen counter. We get to see it. If we get to check their phones, we get to go through their stuff. It really, I bought the phone. I'm paying, they don't have a job, I'm paying for the phone, so it's my phone. So I've got 4 phones in the house. And if I want to check any phone at any time, it's my responsibility and my privilege. So we started that when they were really young. If you want a phone, these are the rules. And so now that they're older, it's not a problem. If something does come up, if we do see a misappropriate use of the phone, then we actually take the phone off them. We actually do have seasons where, you know, they have to rebuild the trust to be able to steward their phone.
That's brilliant. That's great. Again, some of those boundaries are just brilliant around that. A question, and I'll speak into this, where someone's asked, hey, listen, what if 8, it's too late, and I know they're up to some things. How do I now, you know, come back to that? And my advice and my help, and along with Pastor Joel and Sharon tonight that are speaking into this, is that's a cute saying, but at the end of the day, it's never too late. You know, the redemptive power of Christ is incredible, and what God can do in the midst of a willing parent being intentional to say, okay, this might be uncomfortable for a little while now, but we're going to start establishing boundaries. But I do it because I love you. We're going to start having conversations. And so I just think starting wherever you're at, getting some resources and some and books and understanding for yourself to really, you know, arm you with the information so you can start having these conversations. Joel, Sharon, it's been brilliant chatting to you guys. I know the families are going to absolutely love this. I I am going to bring up those resources again. So again, The Chat was the book that you authored, and you can order direct through the website that's there. And again, it is just a wonderful resource to have a conversation with the boys. And I've now got my third boy getting to the age that the Chat will be dusted off and ready to go with number 3. And it has just been a great book to read and go through. I think my middle child might have just found it on the bookshelf one day anyway. It was just sort of sitting there, and it's like, it's a pretty, the cover, what's this? Which is fantastic. Pippin Girl is the other resource there. It's a great resource for girls, and I highly recommend that, finding the resources that are there, exploring all aspects of sexuality for females. And so, again, thank you for being with us. It's just been a great joy having you with us. So have you got any last thoughts, last comments that you want to throw out to us?
Actually, look, it is a real honor to be able to speak and share our journey with you. I think as we're closing, I really felt the Holy Spirit just impressed. For every single parent that's watching this, understand that God picked you to be that child's parent. You were picked. It was no accident. And you may not feel adequate. You may feel like you've made many mistakes. We all do. But just understand that there is a grace on you. There is an anointing on you. And no one else can do that job of being a parent. God picked you. He wants to grace you. And as you surrender your life and your family to God, He's actually going to come in a powerful way and restore a lot of things that may have been broken.
That's incredible. Thank you. I just think that's a word for some of our families right now. Sometimes you're questioning, you're unsure as parents, but really, God didn't make a mistake in when He put you as their parents. And I just want to encourage all the parents. You're doing a fantastic job. You are brilliant. And we as a church, Calvary here, are here to support Calvary Kids with all of the resources. As I said, you can go to our website before, look at our faith pathway, and there's just a great opportunity for you to be armed with The Chat, with Pippin Girl. As I close, we have got coming up in Calvary Kids, we have an incredible day that's coming up real soon in just a few weeks' time. I think about 3 weeks' time, we've got Lego Masters. And so for all of the kids, June 13th is Lego Masters Day. We've actually got Andrew, who is a contestant from season 2. He's going to be with us right across all our campuses, speaking to all the kids in Calvary Kids. So Lego Masters, be on the lookout for all of the promotion coming out. So parents, I invite you out to that. And again, that's a little promo from us anyway here. But Pastor Joel, Sharon, thank you once more for joining us. It's just been a privilege.
See you guys.
Parents, good night. And if you're wanting to watch this again, it's going to be on our YouTube channel, so you can check this out at a later date. But stay tuned to the next Wednesday Night Live, which will be coming up in a couple of months' time. Good night, and have a great week.